This episode is proudly supported by Westholme Australian Wagyu. Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and the Northern Territory, Australia, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. They steward 16 million acres of rangeland, guided by the natural ecosystem where cattle graze and forage on native grasses for the first few years of their lives. The result is high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia. Westholme believe that when nature leads, flavour follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
Listen to the staff and hear what they have to say and where you can make change and act on things. I think as a business owner or even as a colleague or as a friend in a workplace, it's that listening that allows people to feel safe enough.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dirty Linen for another episode. As always, it is Dani Valent with you, and I am excited to be in your ear. Or your ears, most likely. This is going to be a bit of a serious conversation. Since this podcast started, goodness me, almost 700 episodes ago, there are a number of topics that we've kept circling back to, and one of them has been toxic culture in hospitality, and more specifically, misogyny. We have done weeks devoted to this. We have, tapped into important conversations from time to time as things popped up. But I guess, unfortunately, this is a story that has never, it's never all gone. It's never done with. There is always more to say. And over the past week or so, there's certainly been a massive reckoning within the industry following the breaking of a series of stories by the Sydney Morning Herald and Good Food around allegations relating to the Swillhouse group, which runs a number of bars and restaurants in Sydney. I wrote a story, an ancillary story that went along with that was published in The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald and Good Food, just framing that with some of the stats and other stories around sexual harassment that's been experienced by women working in hospitality. It's not fun stuff. It's really draining to engage with this topic. Obviously, it's worst for victims, and there are probably few women out there and people of other genders that are not male that would say they've never been impacted by this. It is, as I say in my story, endemic. I posted about it on Instagram and had a lot of feedback. One of the comments that really stood out to me was from today's guest. Her name is Katie Shortland. She runs some ramen restaurants in Sydney, and she can tell us what she wrote. But what I loved, what really stood out for me, was the hashtag. And I wonder if we can make this one go viral. Hashtag not on my roster. Accountability starts with all of us. Katie, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thanks for having me on, Dani.
Katie, tell me a little bit about your businesses and the way you run them.
So it's actually 6 years ago this month, my business partner, Scott Galt, and I opened our first ramen bar in Redfern in Sydney. It was a first adventure into hospitality for both of us. We both had, and I still do, had careers in film and television. Scott had been a TV editor for a number of years, and I've been working in the legal and finance department of production companies for a long time. And we wanted to take a risk and do something that we thought probably wasn't being done in the same way that we had imagined in Sydney, which was a ramen bar in a cool suburb that was offering something a bit different with great food, great wine, perfect beers, lighting, music, and a really fun and safe and enjoyable place to have a date or see a mate or bring your family and come and have ramen. And over what ended up being now 6 years, we opened up 4 other venues across Sydney and one in southern Queensland. And then as we travelled through COVID and economic recovery, we made some difficult decisions to close some of those venues when their leases came up. And now we are celebrating 6 years with still the original store in Redfern and also our second store in Randwick.
Yeah, well, congratulations on achieving 6 years. I feel like every milestone in hospitality is worth celebrating. And yeah, it sounds like you've certainly been on a journey with the openings and the closures over this very interesting time in hospitality. Katie, let's talk about your teams. What sort of principles have you taken into employing people?
Scott and I have always run the business together, the two of us. We've never had any investors or backers. It was always us from the get-go. And when we first started hiring staff onto the team, whether it was in kitchen or front of house, we were in many ways kind of novices. It was our first hospitality business, and we'd both worked in, a whole bunch of different type of hospitality businesses in the past, but never run something ourselves. And it was very much for us about building a culture from the ground up that was supportive and inclusive. And we're really proud that a lot of the staff that we opened the doors with on the first day are still with us. It's also been a real goal for me to support particularly young female and young female identifying people across the business, whether it's a chef in a kitchen or a noodle maker or a front of house person or someone doing maitre d'. It's always been really important for me that female and female identifying people are part of our team in a way that is not just balancing out the numbers, but it sort of encourages leadership. I think particularly for younger staff, your first job has such an impact on your life. And I know that from personal experience, those years between sort of 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 are really challenging. And we've made it a focus across the business to ensure that we can really support the staff. Also, Scott's always been incredibly encouraging as the head chef in the group to ensure that there's diversity across the kitchen team. It was never going to be about blokes in the kitchen and chicks on the floor. That was never our approach. So that's something that from a hiring point of view, we didn't really know how the old-fashioned rules of hospitality necessarily worked. We've never had shouty chefs, so we've never had kind of that sort of environment. And I think it comes because we have been outsiders a little bit as well, and taken a lot of the principles of how you build teams in film and television in a way to kind of put this team together. And, we're proud that we're really diverse. We've got lots of people of colour and people across all spectrums that work with us and alongside us. They don't just work for us. So that's been, a real big part of how we've built the team at RaRa.
And what happened over the last couple of weeks that I guess gave you an opportunity to put your principles into action?
Yeah, Scott and I were doing some reviewing of our policies and procedures, and obviously, after 2022, there was significant obligations back onto employers. And my day job is actually as a media lawyer, so I was exposed through my day job as well and reminded it's often time when you don't have time to consider things like policies around workplace health and safety. And we've spent probably the last 3 months going into sort of great detail and bringing everything up to date and retraining and, things from fire hydrants to enough staff on schedule and all that kind of approach was very front of mind. And it also so happened to coincide with an incident from within the team where a young person in the team was sort of bold enough to come forward and make a complaint about a senior team member about behaviour that they were experiencing while at work. And it was, the absolute right thing and the bravest thing she could have done to step forward, like many other women have stepped forward this week as well, and sort of shared stories and, went back and realised this is why we have policies and procedures and protocols of the way to do things, is because they're absolutely there to protect the staff and to protect customers and to protect the workplace and make it safe for everyone.
It's this phrase believe women, or believe victims is something that comes up a lot. What do how does that sit with you? Like, what sort of, I suppose, corroboration do you seek when somebody comes forward with a claim as recently happened?
I think look, Dani, each time it happens in each workplace and each is a different set of circumstances. We've been very fortunate that this hasn't really occurred in a substantial way in the past, and this was really the first time that we had to really go back and sort of and be very mindful about how things were treated and conversations that were had. It was we actually had someone else sort of corroborate her communications with me and substantiate that in a way that felt contemporaneous. So felt like it was not a witness as such, but as close to a witness as you can get, because the story had been shared to someone close to them, sort of as it happened. So that really felt like it was substantiated. It was a conversation that was had at an exec level within the team with the most senior staff of two, and handled very delicately. And the way we communicated as owners was really respectful. It was I won't lie, it was a very challenging conversation as owners, but nothing nearly as challenging as someone being brave enough to come and tell you that something had happened to them at work, and not only did they feel embarrassed and ashamed, but were nervous about the repercussions. And I think you kind of go, well, actually, the discomfort that I have in dealing with this is nothing compared to how that person has felt in the workplace, and we have a responsibility to act swiftly. And I think that's the key: is not jumping the gun, being very considered, but moving with an urgency, because this can have an impact in many ways, not just for a staff member, but for the rest of the team as well. So once we had felt we had substantiated enough and spoke to each other, Scott and I, we made a fairly efficient decision that, this is why we have policies, and this is the exact example that we're prepared for. And, I really feel that someone who's brave enough to step forward and say something, it's the hardest thing in the world to do. It's really hard speaking up for yourself. So
Yeah. And so what action did you take?
So it was a meeting, a senior team meeting between an individual and their supervisor, and then the owners as well, to discuss it. And to, I can't really go into a lot of the details, but it's where when you have robust policies that are considered and made sort of cut to cloth for your business, they're the things that you rely on. They're the reasons why you set principles in place. They're the reasons why you have, words on a page that you share and communicate with your team, because that's essentially where you come back to. And if you've made it the heart of how you engage with someone as an employer and an employee, that's what you come back to. And when behaviour can be identified as not being in line with those policies and those protocols, then it's not easier, but it's a more direct conversation to have.
Well, what you wrote on my post was that you dismissed the senior male team member 24 hours after a substantiated complaint, and you did not hesitate to do the tough thing because that behaviour could affect the rest of her life. Tell me about that. Why is it so important to take that action? What kinds of broader impacts can these incidents have on people?
I think particularly for younger team members, it can have an impact on them in terms of their confidence and how they feel as a young person finding a place, particularly in the working environment. It's different when you're at school, and once you step out into the world and you're working, a lot of the support networks that you have when you're younger in school are just, are not there. And I think Scott and I have always tried to lead the business in a way that makes it feel as if we're very approachable and that we'll take responsibility and we'll care for all of the staff in a way that helps build their confidence and makes them great at what they do, because we all make decisions to be in hospitality because we love it. And to be able to put a framework around that that's really supportive is the most important thing as an employer. And I think when you move quickly and decisively on something that is a big step, it does send a message to the rest of the team that it's safe to step forward. It's safe to not just, oh, yeah, they always say you can come and talk to us, but it is a result of that, and it talks the talk. It's also important for other staff members to, and as team members, just to check ourselves and go, okay, and I've been doing it, to be honest, since that conversation. I've been doing it for myself the last 3 weeks in interactions I'm having in my own day job, in the business. I stop and I just think, is that the most appropriate way to frame that? Is that the most appropriate thing to say? And I think that's the reminder that we need sometimes to go, we all work so hard in hospitality. We spend so many hours together. Sometimes it feels like a dysfunctional family. And then sometimes you've got to take a step back and go, okay, let's be really sure that we're doing this in the most professional, supportive way.
Yeah, I mean, on the flip side, I think if people aren't listened to and their complaints are minimised, then the crushing distrust that they carry forward just cannot be, you can't overestimate it. Like the impact of not dealing with it swiftly and, with empathy and with firm policies to back you up, it's just, yeah.
And it's something that, Scott and I said to Scott when it first happened, I said, if this could fundamentally change her life if it's not something that is handled correctly. This could damage her life as a young person growing up a female in hospitality. If we don't do the right thing and don't do it quickly, it could damage her. Fortunately, he's in a position of being, more established in his career and work. He will find work easily. But this impact on her could really affect her for many years. And that's not something that I wanted to be. I wanted to prevent that as much as possible.
I mean, it's interesting you say that he can get a job easily, and, let's hope he's not an asshole when we're in his next job.
And I do have to say, Dani, when we had that conversation, there was a sincere apology. And we've talked this week and definitely in the press about what is a sincere apology. And I think there's other examples of apologies that don't necessarily feel sincere. But when it was raised, I do think there was a learning for him to come out of that. And I hope that's what he takes out of his time with us, is that he can learn about what is more appropriate behaviour.
I think it's worth just stepping back to, you mentioned the 2022 amendment to the National Sex Discrimination Act and the positive duty that it imposes on businesses to eliminate sexual discrimination and harassment. I really think that there are so many small businesses of all natures that aren't really across this. If I can ask you to put your lawyer hat on for a minute, Katie, what do people need to be aware of?
Oh, okay. I'm actually a media lawyer, so I'm definitely not an expert in this area. But the really good thing is, as a business owner and operator, this sounds like an ad for the government, but there are amazing tools available through Fair Work in New South Wales and the Safe Work portal and website. It gives you lots of direction, and it's crafted in a way that as an owner and an operator, you can do this stuff yourself. It's about understanding the breadth of obligations that you have to provide a safe and healthy workplace. So it's a little bit of, workplace health and safety obligation, but it's also a little bit about understanding, anti-discrimination and anti-harassment, anti-bullying. And they're topics that, we really have a lot of general knowledge. When you turn your mind to some of these things as an owner, you have a lot of the general knowledge anyway. But it's about having policies that acknowledge the workplace as a space where we spend time together with other people, and we're not all the same, and we do all come from different backgrounds and different places, often different places from around the world. But we need to know and acknowledge that not only as employees are you taken care of, but you also have an obligation to those around you, and you have responsibilities as an employee. You have a lot more responsibilities as an employer, obviously, and a manager and the supervisors have more responsibilities, but everyone plays a part in that. So I managed to do it myself and step through, the tools that were available from SafeWork and create a model that encourages people to talk a lot to their seniors and their supervisors, and a direct path to Scott and I as owners that if something goes wrong, this is what you do. So as much as simple things like meeting weekly and talking about what the issues are and catching up one-on-one when you think someone in your teams might be struggling or there might be things going on for them, and listening. It's a big part, and it's a really big part of that is listening and observing and seeing how your business is operating.
Absolutely. And it's a federal, you mentioned New South Wales, but it's federal regulations or laws and positive duties. And you can check it out at safeworkaustralia.gov.au, and we'll also put that link in the show notes. Katie, let's talk about the hashtag, because I really think it's so powerful. What does it mean to you to say not on my roster?
It means that this kind of behaviour that has been exposed so publicly in national press this week is not behaviour that, in my business that I own with Scott, we won't accept it. And if someone is on the roster that has we've been alerted to their behaviour and it's been substantiated, we're not, for the benefit of the roster, going to keep them on the books. It's not going to happen that staff feel nervous coming to work because there's someone there that they don't feel comfortable around. And I'm just absolutely not going to accept bad behaviour in my workplace. And it really brought me back to, the critical decision when you make a decision to pull someone immediately off the books. You do it because it's safer for them not to come to work than it is for them to come to work. So it's, for me, I can't be an industry spokesperson, but I can be for the business. And it's just, while Scott and I run the business, it's not going to be like that. So I wanted to share with people that, especially people that are working in hospitality that think they're not getting the right treatment that they deserve, is that we're a safe place where you won't be treated like that. So that was kind of the message behind it, is that my workplace won't be a workplace where you're treated in a way that we've seen in media this week. And there's a lot of workplaces out there that are amazing, safe, incredible hospitality workplaces, and we hope this is the minority. But as you said, Dani, it's unfortunately an issue that we're coming back to with greater regularity.
Yeah, and I think it's good to be speaking about it. It's important to air it. It's better that it's known than being swept under the carpet. I think, some people have come forward, almost, I suppose, disappointed that this is being aired now when they believe the industry is better now than it has been. And look, I think there are a lot of great workplaces. I would say perhaps this just my thought, that perhaps if there are women in senior positions in those workplaces, perhaps there's a better chance that they'll be safe and inclusive workplaces. But there are a lot of great workplaces, but unfortunately there also are some workplaces that are not good, or things that have been done badly, even in the recent past, and there is no reason for people to not be accountable for that.
I agree. And I think we've been speaking this week about, great female leaders particularly, but people that are speaking out and the bravery of doing that. And I know there's been pressure on other people that are running, females that are running hospitality, to speak up for everybody. And I think it's a lot of pressure to put on people, but it's also not quite the conversation. I feel like the conversation is you can't speak up for everybody, but you can speak up for the people that you influence or have within your own realm. And I suppose that's why I got a little bit staunch when I was responding to some messages on social media, because it was coming from a place of this is my opinion. And I've found that certainly, I've worked in television for a long time. It's not that dissimilar in TV. We talk about hospitality being a live television broadcast every night. It's sort of a similar environment in many ways, and I've been fortunate to move up into a more senior role in television, but it's still very similar attitudes between hospitality and the TV industry that I'm trying very hard in my day job to help change as well. So, and I don't know the level of success I'll have at that, but maybe it's also something about a certain age you get to, Dani, where you go, you know what, I'm just not going to sit. I just can't sit quiet for any longer. I'm just going to speak up a bit more and have a response. You have a responsibility, I suppose, to other people that might be coming through that are learning as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got that personal accountability. You're so strong on that. And then, if you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, there are federal laws that put an onus on everybody who's in a workplace to do what they can to prevent discrimination of all sorts. It's sort of like, it's just what's happening in the middle there. It's, I guess we need more people to be personally accountable. We need to, let's dismantle the patriarchy while we're at it. It's all going to be rosy. I know I threw you in the deep end with asking you to speak as a lawyer around the Sex Discrimination Act, but I would love you to as a media lawyer, speak a little bit about the coverage that's been out there this week, and I suppose the understandable frustration from some people around what is and what isn't reported. As a journalist, I know how careful we need to be as mastheads to bring the allegations that have come to light over the last week, like the months of reporting, the incredible diligence, the burden of proof. Can you speak to that as a lawyer?
And it's certainly part of what I've been doing for the last 15 years is looking at content, whether it's, documentaries or scripted projects, and considering, it's a lot of what we all call clearance and ensuring that what's being creatively produced and brought to an audience won't have a detrimental impact from, a defamation point of view or a libel point of view. And I know it is incredibly frustrating when you know the facts and believe that you can make an accusation, but obviously defamation, particularly in Australia in the last sort of 10 years, has become such a hot issue. And, I really applaud the kind of work that Eric and Bianca and you have been doing over the last week with, great support from people like Sarah Norris and Michael Evans. It takes substantial resources to research something and to substantiate it, and then to have it cleared, and then for it to go to press, because it can be damaging if the wrong accusation is made. And it's really important that the clear path to the publication of something is strong enough, because the last thing you want is to have published something and then have to kind of backpedal and take a step down from a position because maybe there's a particular point that you've made about an individual that you can't substantiate with fact. And I've been through a couple of defo cases through work on things that have been, fictional things that have been published based on true events. It is very, very tricky, and it takes time, and it is very difficult when it involves one individual. It can be a lot harder and take a lot longer, but you can't defame an organisation or a company, but you can defame individuals. So I've read that there has been a lot of frustration from people that there are people getting away with it, but it is very difficult. It can be very difficult to really get the message out there without the complication of defamation, which is why, people like Jenna Hemsworth and Rachel Hare coming out and putting it as hard as it. I can't even imagine how difficult it must be to put your name to something. It is really, that's what becomes substantiated. And it's just like the young person in my team stepping up and saying, this is what I experienced and this is what I saw. It's, you then have something that gives you the ability to take action. It's the tooth in the tiger, really, that you need in order to take the next step.
Yeah, that courage, it's awing, honestly, because we've seen over and over again, in Australia, how badly it can go for victim survivors when they do come forward. So yeah, like all credit to anybody who takes that step, because you would be doing it with some anguish, maybe some anger, but definitely a lot of bravery.
Absolutely. And then sort of the subsequent, and I've seen that in my team, is that how is this going to impact me and my future? And I know in my past, moving through media and television, you sort of don't complain and you don't raise things, and you sort of let things skid past you a little bit because you go, they may not think I'm the right person, or I might not get hired for the next job, or the next project might happen, but I might not be on it. So you do hold yourself back sometimes from being able to step forward because you're nervous about your own position within it. But to see people it's incredible that people step forward. It's whistleblowers and victims that can put their hand up and say, I really want to talk about this. That's the stuff that's really, really brave and tough.
Yeah, and back on defamation, like just to, because people understandably don't know much about this space, and I mean, certainly I'm no expert either, but how damaging can it be to, like, let's say you're sued for defamation? How bad could that get for a journalist or for a media organisation?
It gets bad because it's costly. It gets bad because it takes a long time. It gets bad because it's excruciating and always most often in the media spotlight. It's bad for a whole lot of reasons that nothing is resolved quickly, and it's expensive and time consuming, and but also if you're someone who's been the victim of a baseless allegation, or you've been spoken about in a way, or there has been damage to your reputation because of comments that have been made and published, that can also destroy your career and can destroy your livelihood. So, I mean, it's a tricky part of the law because it's a very difficult, as we've seen recently in the last sort of 3 years, that all the big high profile defo cases take a long time to get through the courts. There's a lot of angles that are used by barristers to bring up, history and past, and explainers. I mean, we've seen the most awful things said about people when they've been able to speak up, and they just get dragged through the mud. So it is a really tough, it's tough law to get through. A lot of people, if something has been said, a lot of people would often be counselled, don't bother, it'll take you a long time and it's expensive. But on the other side of that too, there's an obligation that if you've been a victim of an untruth, that you have a right to defend yourself. So, I mean, I'm not an expert. It's not something that I practice, not an area that I practice in professionally, but it is something I've been involved in a number of cases through TV representation. But it's tricky.
Yeah. And just a little personal note from me that I know, that some people have said, is there a non-paywalled version of this article? I get it. We've all got too many subscriptions, but I just would like to point out that this stuff costs money. Like journalists need to be paid, especially when they're putting in, they need to be paid full stop for creating whatever content they're creating. And one of the ways they get paid is by people subscribing to news organisations. Just keep that in mind, people. It's only, I think, $5 a week to subscribe to the digital versions of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald that help pay my bills and allow me to do this podcast. So, Katie, this we hope this is a watershed moment. You know, we've hoped that in the past, but surely the tide eventually does turn and things do improve. And, you know, there are some great workplaces out there. We cannot stress that enough. And there are people having excellent careers in hospitality and feeling supported and mentored and trained the whole way through. And we love to tell those stories. What would you like to see happen from here? Do you think this is, you know, some sort of line that we can draw and say, okay, starting now, it's going to be a bit different?
I really hope so, Dani, and I sort of hope that, you know, people adopting their own sort of position. Like when I say not on my roster, I can't change much, but I can change, you know, 2 restaurants that operate in Sydney and the way that we work. I think it's incredible when, you know, particularly the press like Good Food take really active steps to exclude, you know, venues from something that's prestigious, or, you know, people like Sarah and Mike will, you know, authorise and say, go for it, write the story, and that people like you and Eric and Bianca do the hard work. I do feel like this is a moment to change it, because I think there has been a lot of groundswell. We've seen a lot of media coverage over the last couple of years about sort of bad behaviour and calling it out. I think it is time that we can call it out, and I hope that we can continue to support, you know, workers and colleagues in creating environments where they have the ability to step forward and talk about it. I think the more we talk about it and the more we accept and the more we congratulate the people that are stepping out of their comfort zone and putting their names to what's happened, and we pat them on the back and say good on you, and we say that, you know, that's an amazing thing to do, and listen. I actually just think the biggest thing you can do sometimes is listen, which is the opposite of what I've done today, because I've just talked my face off. But it's actually listen to the staff and hear what they have to say, and where you can make change and act on things. I think as a business owner, or even as a colleague or as a friend in a workplace, it's that listening that allows people to feel safe enough.
Well, Katie, your job today was definitely to talk your face off, and I am grateful to you for doing so, being so articulate, so strong, and being part of the change that we all want to see. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise as a hospitality business owner, but also as a lawyer, to Dirty Linen. I'm super grateful to you for your perspective.
Thanks, Dani, and thanks for the work that you've been doing too. It's inspiring, so thanks very much.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat.deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This